Welcome in. Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. This is the Christmas episode of the Fergus Spotlight podcast. I'm excited. I'm your host, Jacob Bittner. I am here with an awesome special guest today. I have Missy Hermes from the Otter Tail County Historical Society. You wear a few different hats in our community.
I do.
Yes.
I don't just work at the Historical Society. I'm the museum teacher there. But you're right. I am on the school board, and I am in the Catholic Daughters, and I am the regent for the Daughters of the American Revolution.
What does that even mean?
Wow. It is a service organization, and every member can trace their lineage back to a patriot of the American Revolutionary War.
Whoa.
You should have us on another time.
I should. That sounds like a whole episode in itself.
It
I mean,
does.
it's like low-hanging fruit. You guys are just such a blessing as a local podcast host, somebody covering our community. You guys are like an endless pool of content. So there's no shortage of things to talk about when I get you guys from the Historical Society on. So
True.
But today it's all about Christmas, and we're going to talk about, I have some notes here about like general history of Christmas, but
Okay.
people can get those stories. I mean, everybody's heard the Christmas story from the Bible. Well, maybe not everybody, but those stories are like readily available.
True.
You can get the history of St. Nicholas, like all that stuff. Today, we're gonna get like some Otter Tail County, some like local Christmas history. So I'm really excited to hear what you have for us. Can you give a little preview of like some of the stories we're gonna be going through?
Sure. Well, I started putting these stories together over time. I used to get a lot of requests for organizations that would have a Christmas party for a short program, like women's teas, church groups. They were looking for something. And so as I found stories, I would set them aside for Christmas and for that program. And so they might be Christmas during the Homestead era. What was it like? Christmas for new immigrants to the United States, to Minnesota. How did they celebrate in this new land? Or a lot of military stories, men and women serving during wartime and overseas, and what was their experience like. So those are just an idea of some of the stories I'm going to share today.
Awesome. And you do some programs as well out of the Historical Society. Do you guys do these Christmas programs as well?
I do. And just this month, I went to visit veterans at the Veterans Home here in Fergus Falls. I went to the Riverview Heights high-rise here in Fergus, and the Fergus Assisted Living, Frazee Assisted Living. Yesterday, I was at the Lakeview Heights apartments in Battle Lake, and for each one of those groups, I was talking about the history of fruitcake. Everybody's favorite Christmas treat, right? Or the difference between fruitcake and plum pudding.
Oh, what? Real quick, but I mean, don't spoil anything. But what is the history of fruitcake? Is that a Christmas thing?
It is. Fruitcake is definitely a Christmas thing. In fact, when I left the museum, the Genealogy Society was having their Christmas party, and they were enjoying all kinds of treats, including fruitcake. But in our countries that are associated with England, Ireland, Scotland, places like that, they have something called plum pudding or Christmas pudding, which is steamed, similar ingredients to fruitcake, nuts and fruits and flour and rum or brandy, something like that, as a preservative.
I don't know if I've ever had rum or brandy in my fruitcake. I haven't had a lot of fruitcake. I feel like it's kind of one of those things. Like, is it anybody's favorite? Really? Does anybody really love it?
There's really two camps. You either really love it or you really don't.
Yeah, that's like the noodle pie. We're getting off track. We're getting off topic, but that's the noodle pie in my house. Like, I feel like we got to have a noodle. Yes, a kugel.
Is that what it is?
I don't know.
Isn't Kugel a noodle?
Probably.
Yeah.
That's probably the proper term of it. But there's always like, you hate it or you love it, you know. But, well, before we get into this very, very, it's going to be a good conversation. I'm not sure how long we're going to go. I'm going to let you talk as long as you want to talk today.
Okay.
So we could be here all night. Who knows? But I have my festive hat on if you guys hear any bells. But also, I just want to thank my sponsors as we're nearing the end of the year here. It's been awesome building this and having so many people come along and support it and allow me to be a part of telling stories with you guys in this community. So yeah, Atlas Outdoor Services, Outstate Brewing. We have some beers in front of us. I didn't have time to go do get a beer of the week today, and I'm also like, I was at the Vikings game last night, and I had a little bit to drink.
Is there a fruitcake flavored beer?
There is no fruitcake flavored beer. I don't know if Outstate has ever done a fruitcake. They should do like a fruitcake sour beer. That would be a good.
Because it has a lot of fruits in it, or maybe a lefse. A lot of people have
lefse. I wonder what a lefse beer would taste like. Along with Outstate, Stumbeano's, Victor Lundeen's, Fergus Home and Hardware, Liberty Business Systems, and Wayne Schuett with Century 21 Atwood. You guys are all much, much appreciated. So, Missy, before we do get into all these Christmas stories, you want to give us just a little brief history of your background and how you ended up doing what you're doing? I usually like to go deep dive into people's lives, but you can give us like the Cliff Notes version, and then we'll move on to some Christmas stuff.
Okay, I'm from Colorado originally, and after college, I joined the Peace Corps, and I was serving in Chad, Africa, and that's where I met my husband, who's from Elbow Lake, Minnesota, and he said that this was God's country, and so I believed him, and we got married. I moved to Fergus Falls, and so I moved here in 1991, and that's pretty much when I started working at the Historical Society. I took a short break when my kids were little, and then came back in about 2009.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a lot more to unpack there. So just talk about the Peace Corps a little bit. How long did you do that, and how'd you get? Were you do you have like an activist spirit inside of you? Does it take an activist spirit to join the Peace Corps?
That's probably why I was a teacher anyway. And so then I signed up to teach English as a foreign language, because most of the people in the country where I served either speak French at school or they speak different tribal languages, different indigenous languages. And then, Then when I came here, it was a great fit for me because I love history, and then to also be a teacher and put that together. And so I do, like I said, programs at assisted living or nursing homes, but also for church groups or for service groups and in schools. And then, of course, school groups come to visit us. Last week we had 4 classes of 6th graders come. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it here. I mentioned, you can get the history of Christmas elsewhere. I'm just going to kind of go over some stuff here. It really has, roots, the predating like the Christian era, around like surrounding the winter solstice. You had like the Yule, the Scandinavian Yule festivals, a Norse festival honoring the sun's return. It's all focused around this winter solstice here. Saturnalia.
Okay.
That's a Roman festival honoring Saturn, the god of agriculture, featuring feasts, gift giving, role reversals. I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know, some weird Roman roots. And then there's this Dies Natalius Solus Invicti. That's a mouthful there. I wouldn't.
Right.
But that has to do with, again, birthdays. It's like the birth of the unconquered sun, celebrated on December 25th in honor of the sun god Mithras. So there's definitely before Christianity kind of came, it would have been, looks like the 4th century was when the Roman Church officially designated December 25th as the date to celebrate Jesus Christ's birth. And then it kind of aligned with all of these pagan solstice festivals, and they kind of just sort of took over the holiday. And then obviously St. Nicholas, that character kind of comes. What do you know about St. Nicholas? And,
I think
and how
he's from
he came to
Turkey.
be? Okay.
And I know, I worked for a short time at Our Lady of Victory School, and I know
Okay.
that they studied St. Nicholas, and that on St. Nicholas Day, which is December 6th, that's in some countries, that's the day that children put their shoes out, and St. Nicholas brings candy and gifts on St. Nicholas Day
Interesting.
instead of Santa Claus coming on December 20th.
Oh, you might be cutting out on the mic there a little bit.
sorry.
I'll have to have you come into that mic maybe just a little bit more. But
Yeah.
and then obviously there's so much tradition here. The gift giving obviously was inspired by St. Nicholas, his generosity towards children in need. That's really where all of that came from. We mentioned the Yule logs. I don't know. Have you ever burned a Yule log?
No.
I've never burned a Yule log, but that is very much so. We're here in Scandinavian country. The Yule log has those Scandinavian roots. So maybe, burn a Yule log and get in touch with your Scandinavian spirit this year. The mistletoe, pagans use them for protection and fertility. Christians adopted them to symbolize Christ's crown of thorns and love. Dang, that's interesting.
So that's why people kiss under the mistletoe.
That's why people are kissing under the mistletoe. Very
okay.
interesting. Caroling started as pagan winter songs and evolved into Christian hymns spreading joy. Very interesting. I've had a little caroling group going. We're going to get out and do some caroling.
I love that.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff here. You can get all of this kind of information online. I think the big theme is how kind of there's a few different things going on. Obviously, you have the winter solstice and that roots. You have the Christian, the birth of Jesus, and then you have this consumerism. Really, in the last kind of 100 years, the consumerism side of Christmas has really just changed what the holiday is. This is make or break time for businesses in Q4. It's like everything in our economy kind of feels like it's hinging on how good is your Christmas season going to be.
Right. And it's not just toys, right? You've got cards, Christmas decorations, lights, the feasting part, all the different ingredients that go into making cookies and a big Christmas dinner.
Yeah. So the history now of Christmas in our area, Otter Tail County, Fergus Falls, kind of whatever you have to share. But yeah, I'm interested to hear these stories.
Okay, so probably Christmas was first celebrated in this part of Minnesota by people, men and women involved in the fur trade. So you've got Catholics that are from France, Scotland, and Ireland working in the fur trade. And they are marrying Native American women, whether Dakota or Anishinaabe women, and having families. And that time of the year, it's cold, right? They're busy. The people that are involved in the fur trade, that's the time when animals have that thickest fur. But there's always time to have a celebration. So dancing, feasting, partying. And so those were probably the first people. And I don't have any stories. We don't have anything written down. Okay. But then for the first Christmas that would have been celebrated in Otter Tail County would have been with some of the first homesteaders that came in 1865. And they did write down, they did mark the holiday, and they did write down what they were doing. I found I found a story that appeared in the Fergus Falls paper, and it was written by, see if I can find it, by people that were living in Pelican Rapids, and talking about how, yes, that they had celebrated Christmas and that they had gotten in their sleighs and headed into town. And it was mostly children that were went to Sunday school. They must have had a small little church, and that for them, having a Christmas tree is one Christmas tree at the church, and people would have made sure that each child had a toy on that tree and maybe had some special candies, but not a lot. It wasn't a big thing. Hannah Kempfer was the first woman from rural Minnesota to be elected to the state legislature. She was from Earhart. And we know from her childhood memories that when they arrived from Norway, their family was absolutely destitute. They were just so poor. And that first Christmas, she got an apple, just an apple for Christmas. And she said she managed to make it last for 13 days by just taking one bite. And I think some of us have kids that have long, long lists of things that they want. And I wonder what would happen if a child just got an apple. Or those first, we know there was a Swedish family that lived near Clitheroe too, and their descendant is Reuben Parsons, wrote a book called Ever the Land. I highly recommend it. Really good book. And those girls wanted mittens. And so somebody had to go all the way over to Clitheroe, that's walking, to purchase the wool so that those girls could have a pair of mittens. I think some of us just take for granted. I mean, if you've ever walked by a lost and found at a school anywhere in this county and seen all the pairs of mittens that are left on a bus or behind in a classroom, and then to imagine that somebody 150 years ago wanted a pair of mittens for Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, that just goes to show, I mean, I'm excited to hear some more of those stories and kind of hear how some of that stuff went, but that speaks more of just the rise of consumerism, the rise of really it's kind of a bummer to see what Christmas does to kids these days. And it's different parents and different stuff, but then like it's pressure on parents, it's pressure on everybody. The gift giving, I think, has really gotten out of control. Kind of in the Christmas.
Some ways, and I think we can put a little bit of that onto television or social media or just what kids see all the time during the day. We have stories from the Depression. Mindy is a lady who wrote a book about what it was like to when she was growing up near Battle Lake, and she said that in 1935, so that's the middle of the Depression, right? She said that their big thing that they looked forward to every year was her mom taking her and her sister to Fergus Falls to go shopping. And she said that a special treat was going shopping at Woolworth's, 5 and dime, in Fergus Falls. She said, though, that all the toys were way up high so that little kids couldn't reach them. You could just see them up there, but you couldn't play with them. And she said in 1935, they had not yet been able to go on their shopping trip to Fergus Falls when the entire family, except for her, Mindy, came down with the flu, which probably some of us can relate to that, right? And she said her mom had not been able to make cookies yet or do lefse baking. Now she was confined to bed, and a day or two later, her sister was sick, and then their father got sick too, and they lived on a dairy farm. She said her dad, they had chills, body aches, and a fever, and they couldn't keep food down, but the dad still had to take care of the animals. And so he would still had to separate the cream from the milk, pump water, feed the animals hay and silage, and go back and forth from the house to the barn, etc. And he was just absolutely beat when he would drag himself back in. But she said that he managed to put up a little Christmas tree at the foot of the bed. They were all in the same room now because they just couldn't even take care of. They were just so sick. They were stuck in bed. And she said that year, She said, Mother put 4 boxes of Christmas gifts under the tree. There were work stockings for Father and new slippers for the girls and the mom that she had ordered from the Montgomery Ward catalog. And for supper, nobody else could eat except this little Mindy. So her mom had cut up a boiled cold potato and some salt pork. They fried it. And she got some milk from a jar in the pantry. But she said, I delivered the Christmas gifts to each patient lying in bed, although they were all too ill to enjoy it. And even so, it was Christmas Eve. I had decorated our little tree. My family was with me in the house, and I was quite content. I put on my new slippers and played under the tree with my old toys, my crayons, and a coloring book. So maybe that's it. It's family.
Yeah.
That's the center.
And it is. And
of the holiday.
And that's the, holiday. Man, it is a tough time of year for people who don't have that family or just have memories of those moments in the holiday with them. And so absolutely cherish that over gifts and over, just being there with someone and hopefully getting your kids to understand the significance of just gathering and being together rather than, oh, what do you want? Or I think it was Sears. I think you owe it to, was it Sears or who was the catalog that was like, circle everything you want for Christmas, choose what you want for J.C. Penney.
Yes.
Like, I think that it probably happened before that, but I'm just thinking back to my childhood.
That's what I did.
And kind of how I was programmed or how we were kind of, it's.
And where did you go to see Santa to ask for him? When I was growing up, it was at a department store.
Go to the mall. You go to the mall and see Santa, sit on Santa's lap, ask what you want. Yeah. It's it's crazy. So what else do we have here for stories from I guess you said something about life on the prairie or
I do have some stories like that, but I have what's interesting is how these stories come about, right? How do I find these? Because I'm not always looking for a story. I was recently looking up information about Barb Donahoe. So Barb Donahoe was the first woman mayor of Fergus Falls.
Okay. When was that?
That was in 1972 or 76. It was in the early 70s.
Have we had more women mayors?
No.
Since? So she's the first and
she's only.
First and only.
That's
Dang.
correct.
Wow.
Right. And the year she was elected, another woman was elected too. And her name was June Barnum Ryan. She was elected to the city council. So the first woman on the city council and first woman mayor. So I was looking that up, and here is an article written for the Daily Journal by June Barnum. So she was also on the radio, and she worked for the Daily Journal.
Maybe KBRF radio back in the day.
I'm trying to think of some of the other radio stations.
I mean, KBRF has been around for like
a long time.
I think it's like over 100 years or close to 100 years.
There was a radio station downtown called KGDF.
Okay.
KGDE. Sorry, okay. KGDE. And one of I was doing a program about the cyclone one time, and a man who was visiting the museum, who's a veteran at the Veterans Home, said that KGDE stood for Cadets Girls Do Everything.
Interesting.
That's not very Christmassy, Missy. You're not supposed to share stories like that. But so here's June Barnum writing an article in the paper about baking, and it was a Mrs. Hilmer Bergstrom. I wonder if there's any listeners that would know Mrs. Bergstrom. Back in the day, this looks like the 60s or late 50s, and she said her Christmas baking starts at the end of October.
Yikes.
And for Dorothy Bergstrom, she loves to be in the kitchen and proves it by turning out an unusual variety of Christmas goodies every year. Every early planning is necessary since she is also employed full-time as a receptionist and meter clerk at the Otter Tail Power Company district office. And this year it says she had a little extra help from her husband, Hilmer, who is retired recently. So she makes, she also, in addition to doing all these cookies, wrote 70 to 80 Christmas letters every year. But she said that some of the things, she makes 24 different kinds of cookies and bars, 16 different recipes for breads, rolls, coffee cakes, and other candies and other Christmas specialties.
I feel like that era, that would have been probably like, my grandma's generation, probably.
There she is.
What year was that?
I think it's the 1960s, early 60s. Yeah.
Because I feel like, and it's just maybe it was just lost in my family. I'm sure different families carry different traditions on, but I miss the baking. I miss that, like, my grandma, when she was alive, she was so good at like baking cookies and getting everybody cookies. She probably started in November too, baking for Christmas.
It's true. And this, they included her recipe for sour cream pie and her Christmas pudding, which interestingly enough has raw carrot grated into it and raw potato.
Ooh, are those recipes available online on the Historical Society? Like for listeners?
We could. Here, I'll just give you.
Do you want me to read it or what?
Do you want me to read it out loud?
Let's hear the recipe.
We can put this on. You can put it on the website. Sure.
Okay. Yeah,
So Christmas pudding, it says a cup of grated raw carrot, a cup of raw potatoes ground, a cup of sugar, a cup of nuts. It doesn't say what kind, so walnuts or pecans or whatever you like. A cup of dates, a cup of raisins, 1.5 cups of flour, a third of a cup of butter, 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk, 2 tablespoons of fruit juice.
Dang.
This is a teetotaler type recipe. There's no brandy or rum in this one. We could switch that for the fruit juice. We could put brandy in there instead.
I like that. I like you, Missy. I think
2 teaspoons of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, creaming the butter and sugar together, add it all, put it in a number 2 vegetable can.
Okay.
I don't even know what that is. Fill 3/4 full and cover with tin foil. Steam it for 2 hours in boiling water. So it's not baked.
We're talking a full day. We're talking a full day ordeal here just to make some pudding. Wow.
I know. Wow. Maybe frozen until ready to use. Steam again before using. Serve with lemon sauce, rum sauce, or whipped cream.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, yeah, I just got done with an episode not too long ago with Acres of Eden Farm, and we talked about food and how like the commercialization of farming and like how now you just get your food from the store, and like nobody cooks, like even the people that cook homemade pudding and stuff, they're not doing it like that anymore. So yeah, it's very interesting.
No. Right. No, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, what else you got? So you have a whole binder, you have a whole stack. So
my goal is to someday make an anthology of Otter Tail County Christmas stories.
I love that.
Just to have it grouped by, let's say, Christmas stories from country schools. Think how many of your listeners probably went to country school or their grandparents did.
Not to get dark, but do we have any like Christmas tragedies in our county, or like anything that comes to mind when I ask that question?
Well, I can't think of any, and maybe that's because I didn't set those aside. You don't want to really think about that, right?
Right.
There's probably some blizzard that happened and people got stuck in it. I know January, there seems like there are a lot of Christmas or holiday blizzards or that time period. And back in the day, that could be really serious. You didn't have the weather, somebody telling you like I just got, before I left and came here, there was a notice saying be careful because we're going to get a lot of snow and weather advisory. They didn't have that. And so if it was nice, it looked nice out, you just headed out to the wood lot or to do some chores or go to town, and you could get caught in a bad, bad storm. Yeah,
and a lot of people, before automobiles, obviously were traveling by horses and getting caught out and that stuff. So,
I don't know. Is it tragic though? I think a lot of these stories that I have from military service,
Mm.
they are not, they're sad.
Yeah.
Many of them. These are often young men that are away from home, and the conditions are not favorable. They're not good. And there is no warm fire to gather around. The foods are really not what you are thinking about for Christmas. And so there's a lot of stories, like I have a lot like that.
Hmm.
And people here in this county were really good about trying to make Christmas merry for our service members that were overseas. I have a story from World War I that there were the Red Cross and women in Fergus Falls, Pelican Rapids, Perham, Parker's Prairie, all over the county. These Red Cross groups tried to put together Christmas boxes that they could send to our service members overseas. And so here it says, this is from December 5th, 1918. This is a newspaper that was published for a short time in Otter Tail County, the Wheelocks Weekly. And it says here, the Christmas boxes are on their way. Almost every boy in France from this county will get one. Red Cross activity in furthering the shipment of Christmas packages to the boys in France ended last Saturday. In this county, there's an effort to reach every man with a parcel from home. And some of the things that might have been in there would be cigarettes or tobacco, raisins, some toiletries, just some decks of cards, things like that, games or some short books, things like that. But it lists the numbers and the women. There are 14 shipping centers in the county. So, and then the different ladies that were in charge of that. So in Fergus Falls, it says M.E. Easterday. I don't recognize that name, but it says 100 cartons were sent to the above in response to later calls, so that they had 1,300 packages sent overseas to men from Otter Tail County, just to make sure that they had something merry in their Christmas. But not everybody did have a Merry Christmas that year. And we have a diary at the museum from a man named Herbert Sitz, who was from Perham. And he kept a diary. And it's interesting because he also wrote letters home. So to compare what he would say to his family, where he's keeping a stiff upper lip and making sure that his parents and his sisters and brothers were not worried about him. He would say, everything's fine here. We had a great dinner and it was really good. And then his diary would say something like this: Christmas, December 25th, 1918, the most dismal Christmas I've ever spent. The only bright spot was a visit to the town. The people there were all German captives for 4 years, so I could talk to them, and they were made to work hard. I gave some of the children some silver francs, and to show how much our officers care about us, the YMCA had chocolate gum and cookies and tobacco for all of us, but our officers were indifferent, and they didn't get it for us. In fact, there were 15 pounds of candy issued, and they were consumed by the sergeants, half of it, and then the other half was gambled by the sergeants. So we spent Christmas without a bit of extras. The entertainment was highly inappropriate. Namely, it was lewd and obscene. Altogether, a miserable day. Our chaplain didn't even show up. And then the last line, no mail.
No mail.
No, poor guy.
That's tough. That is tough. That's tough.
Terrible.
And I heard one of my coworkers put together a really cool. He does another podcast, The Crude Life, and he put together like a Christmas greetings just from a bunch of people from overseas, and just hearing like a montage of people wishing their families Merry Christmas from overseas. It gets you, because it's like, dang, that's. It's tough. It
is tough. Yep. And we have a Civil War diary that's very similar, that this guy was serving in, it's Ebenezer Corliss. So Ebenezer, it's a good Christmas name, right?
Yeah.
But Eb Corliss was just early 20s, and he would later on become our first Otter Tail County attorney, and lived here in Fergus Falls. His house that he built way back in the 1800s is still there on West Lincoln Avenue, but he served in the Civil War. He was 19 when he enlisted, and his brother William was only 17 when they went away. And they also served with Ed Everts, who Everts Township, Battle Lake is named after. So they all were in the same unit together. But in 1863, he kept a diary, and this is what he said about his Christmas. Well, it is Christmas Day, so I'm going to have a feast. I got up and I went to the train, and I extracted an ear of corn from one of the poor mules who needed the corn as much as I did. But as he's not conscious that it's Christmas, I thought I would take it. This, with a piece of pork which I had saved for the occasion, I constituted my feast. I did not call a guest, for I well know that one nubbin of corn would not be enough for many, and two, when men has such an appetite as they have now in this cold weather, I enjoyed it all alone, and this has to last until tomorrow. So they didn't have any mail either or anything special.
Yep. What about community? Do you have any stories of like community helping people who would have otherwise spent holidays alone?
I tell you what, we have a lot of stories about Christmas at the Fergus Falls State Hospital.
Oh.
You know, it was often people would have Christmas parties. I feel like maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of people in Fergus Falls did a lot to maybe bring Girl Scouts up or to go singing or caroling up there. I remember when I first moved to Fergus Falls, they would have notices in the paper collecting gifts, and you could take it up there. Somebody would wrap presents for the residents up at the state hospital. So this is a story I found from 1944, so also during World War II, but this is a Christmas party up at the state hospital. It says, so this is after Christmas already happened. Christmas week at the Fergus Falls State Hospital is a most enjoyable season. No stone is left unturned in the most friendly spirit to give the patients the grandest of times. The hospital fairly sparkles with color and variety, smiles, and goodwill. There are parties of all kinds, entertainments, dances, delicious Christmas dinner, and church services. But to my way of thinking, second to none after the perfect Christmas dinner comes the card party.
The card party.
The card party Monday night presented an opportunity for the card sharks to show their colors as guests of the occupational therapy department. Miss Sheeran and Mr. Fick as hosts and Mrs. Rink and Miss Luther as assistants. One might expect a very pleasant evening, and we enjoyed ourselves far beyond our expectations. The beautifully decorated auditorium with dishes of colorful Christmas candy on the card tables was filled to capacity with a friendly group, all with the same thought in mind. The slogan could be guessed without speaking it, out to win. But it says the old-fashioned favorite Norwegian whist was the game, and the playing was interesting and intense, as one might determine from the highest scores of 68 for the gentlemen and 62 for the ladies. Mr. Ole Skatterud carried off honors for the evening, and Mrs. Anna Rasmussen close second. Wow. So, and they had feasts. It was amazing how much food they had to make, how many pounds of turkey. I think I even have one of these menus here at the state hospital, but they had dances, not just for the residents, but many of the staff lived right there. The nurses were right on, and so they had Christmas exercises on Christmas evening. Everything was arranged. Remember, there was at the state hospital a greenhouse, so they could grow their own poinsettias and a lot of the flowers, not just at Christmas, but at Easter too. But they had, it says, Santa Claus appeared on the scene, and a very pretty fairy. So when somebody dressed up as a Christmas fairy with a wave of her magic wand, they had a fake chimney that broke away and transformed into candy and popcorn that was presented to the patients.
Interesting.
Hard to even imagine it. And then the steward, O.E. Chase, had generously provided for the occasion, and every patient received a Christmas present, such as a pair of mittens, a hat, a handkerchief, a pipe, or something of that kind, as well as candy and nuts. Small Christmas trees were on place in each of the wards. Okay, here's the Christmas dinner. The bill of fare consisted of turkey, cranberry sauce, boiled potatoes, boiled rice, breads, butter, mince pie, apples, and mixed nuts. They served 800 pounds of turkey.
Whoa.
250 mince pies, a barrel of cranberry sauce, and other things in proportion were prepared for the evening.
Interesting.
Wow. And one of the first places that ever saw a moving picture, was a Christmas party that was held up at the state hospital. They had a moving picture.
Wow. What that's crazy. I can only imagine all of the stuff that sounds like it would have been quite the festival. I forget how many people Chris told me were residents there at the peak.
And it was in the thousands.
Yeah.
Something like 3,000, maybe more. Yep, he's not here to tell us that, but you're right. It was 1906. It says that they had the Bijou Movie Company, which had its theater downtown, brought up the moving pictures, and so they showed Ben-Hur at the state hospital.
Interesting. I don't know why I got a little sidetracked because you said something about the chimney opening up, and I was like, the chimney. I was like, I was wondering a lot of things about Christmas today. So like one of the things I asked my assistant was like, why does Santa come down a chimney? Do you know where that comes from at all?
Did you find out?
A little bit here. It says that like the chimney or hearth was seen as a magical entryway. This was like pre-Christian European traditions.
Don't they do that in Harry Potter? Don't they go in and out of
is it
a fireplace?
Or it's a fireplace or like a brick wall.
Well, that's
or
a
something.
hearth, right?
A hearth. Okay, that's a hearth.
Yeah,
okay. Hearth, yeah. Norse mythology features household spirits like Tomte, Scandinavian elves, or Nisse.
Oh, Nissa and Tanta. Yeah.
Nissa and Tanta, who were believed to enter homes through the chimney to bring good fortune or cause mischief. One of the two. Either bring good fortune or cause mischief.
Kind of like the elf on the shelf.
Right. So, I don't know. I don't know why it's kind of sparked that. But then the St. Nicholas, I guess that came to like him throwing bags of coins down chimneys or something like that. I don't know. Supposedly, maybe that was part of it. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And obviously, history does what it does to do that stuff. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine.
The Christmas. That was my
that's
moment.
great. That was great. A great.
I love
segue.
when I can teach the history people something about history. Then I was successful today.
Well, and at the state hospital, again, during wartime, they had to make some changes just like everybody else did. Those fruitcakes we were talking about earlier, or plum puddings, a lot of those things would have been rationed during wartime, whether it was World War I or II. So sugar and the spices were imported from other countries, and flour, all those things were rationed. And so I know at the state hospital, they had, this is just a facsimile of one of their newsletters called the Weekly Pulse.
Okay.
They had a 2-page legal size newsletter that came out, and they would put announcements in there: no raisins, no dried fruits this year. So unless you could grow that in your orchard or on your farm, you were going to have to do without some of those things. But one of the things they had, in addition to their own greenhouse, they had their own printing office at the state hospital, and they would put out 4,000 Christmas booklets every year.
Oh.
because they would have often a Christmas play too, and the public could be invited, not as well as the people that were residents there or staff. And so imagine putting together 4,000 booklets.
And those would be like for the play?
Mm-hmm.
And so they would be like script or
I don't know.
do you don't have
but
any
I
of those
know
old booklets?
I don't have
Okay.
any. We probably have one at the museum, but I'm sure they
Ah.
wouldn't let me take it out. But I know that for the newsletter, they had someone who was really gifted at illustration, and these aren't very good examples here, but they're I love reading those.
So is that, I mean, that kind of sparks my mind and gets my mind rolling about like traditions, like lost traditions in our community. Like we probably have had some super cool traditions and done some super cool stuff that we don't do anymore.
Well, and I think it's hard to keep some of them going.
Yeah.
You know, my mom did handwrite probably 70, 80 Christmas cards.
Wow.
And now, I mean, I'm lucky to get out a few, and not that many people do that anymore.
Right.
Do you think? Is that a tradition
I
that
don't
goes?
think so anymore. I think I stopped getting, again, my grandma's generation. That's, I don't know. Maybe it was like lost with my parents. And I'm sure other people probably, like, I always got birthday cards. I always got handwritten Christmas cards from my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that stuff kind of left with them. I feel like that's, at least in our family, which is kind of sad. That's kind of sad to think about that.
Right, because that for me, that was the one time in the year for some people that I ever heard from them, that you kept in contact, or that they probably heard from me too. Yeah. I think too about the Christmas programs that schools used to put on, the country schools. That was a huge, huge thing. Otter Tail County at one time had close to 300 country schools. And one of the biggest events in every year, and I'm going to say it was the biggest event for every school district in the county, was their Christmas program. So the teacher would work and work to make it perfect. And each child had different recitations, different poems that they had to put on. They might do short dances. They sang Christmas carols. There was already always a reenactment of the nativity, so somebody got to be Mary and so on. And we did for a long time recreate that at the Historical Society each year. But I'm not sure how many people remember that now, that event. But even people that didn't have kids at a country school made sure they went to that Christmas program. And they would have a real tree, and oftentimes they had lit candles on that Christmas tree. So one of the dads or grandpas would stand by the tree with sand or a bucket of water to make sure that if the tree caught on fire. I've never read a story. That would be a disaster right there.
Yeah, Christmas tragedy, the fire, tree fire. You know, lots of crazy things have happened on Christmas. I think Christmas, isn't it a busy day for emergency rooms? Or am I wrong about that? Or is it, I know 4th of July is, but that's for different reasons. But I thought Christmas, I think it is. I think you do see spikes in any holiday, you know, with injuries and one of the things that stood out to me in a couple themes from like some of the stuff you were going through there is the games. The games are a tradition that my family, we haven't played games in a few years. Actually, that's not true. I think we played games last Christmas. But games are always a good way to just enjoy the holiday and kind of pass time. I think that taking a day or two off to just play a game and spend time with family, that's really what Christmas is all about. Like, let's take this pause in our life. Let's take this break in our life and just enjoy a game.
We do a puzzle.
A puzzle.
It takes more than one day, though.
Yes.
And my husband doesn't always have happy, Merry Christmas words when he's putting, because sometimes they're challenging.
Games don't always bring out Christmas joy. They don't always bring out Christmas joy.
Right. Sometimes the old Scrooge comes out.
Yes.
Right. And we have examples of Scrooges in Otter Tail
I
County.
love it. Let's hear it.
Too. So there was a gentleman named, his name was, I have to find it now, my story. I just had it. But, oh, here it is. His name was R.J. Angus. Now, he was a upstanding citizen in Fergus Falls. In fact, after the cyclone of 1919, I'm sure Chris has talked about that with you before, the big tornado, he was one of the people that helped organize the relief for the citizens of Fergus Falls who had lost their homes, their businesses, their jobs.
We haven't done a deep dive on the tornado, but I want it would be a good full episode to do because we've brushed over it and talked about it in a few different episodes. But it would be good to dive into the cyclone.
So generally, he was a very generous person. But in 1913, I found an article in the paper he had written to the Daily Journal.
Let's go.
R.J. Angus. And he said that, so Mrs. Woodrow Wilson at that time, so her husband was a president, she was heading up a society called the Society for the Prevention of Useless Giving of Gifts, the SPUG movement. And this R.J. Angus thought it was a great idea. I must have been the prime mover in this SPUG campaign, as I have preached this doctrine for the past 5 years. I am so glad to see that it is becoming a national movement and hope that will be taken up here at home. The amount of useless worry and energy that is expended each year, more especially from the feminine portion of our families. Now, mind you, he was a bachelor. In keeping up with Lizzie, it says, in the matter of the barter of gifts at the Christmas season renders the season, which ought to be one of peace and joy, burdensome in the extreme. So
I like this guy kind of. I don't hate I don't hate the rant. You know, I appreciate the colorful rant in the paper.
I wonder what the response was. I should have looked it up if anybody replied to him. But he said, prosper the work of remembering children in the joyful spirit of Christmas, but just senseless giving of gifts to people. He was not for that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the other business leaders in town, like you said, who were hoping on a big Christmas, they appreciated his thoughts.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I know especially the online sales have gotten just out of control right now. I mean, it's just, consumerism in Christmas really has just gotten out of control. So I actually feel that guy's rant. I feel like that's kind of a little timeless article.
Well, and whose dad hasn't said some of that stuff? Like, no more.
Oh. What else here? We've been going for 52 minutes. So we've had a good long chat here. We're past the KBRF hour, but we can talk, I mean, as long as we want to.
I think I just want to wrap up maybe with one poem that I found. So this is it's just so kind of perfect for that, like you said, the timeless spirit of the season, right? And this is from 1943. So again, World War II, that time period. But this was in the Fergus Falls High School newsletter. They used to put out a really good newspaper. That might be a fun thing to do again.
Yeah.
And this student named Allie Mitchell wrote a little article, and she said, once again, this Christmas season is here, and we are reminded of it on every hand. The halls echo with familiar carols. Shoppers hurry about early and late. Store windows are tempting us to buy, for this is the season of giving. There is excitement in the air, and the Christmas season is at hand. This year, however, there is a new note in the Christmas carols, a new expression on the faces of Christmas shoppers. There is scarcely a home that is not affected by it. Homes have been broken. There is no peace on earth. We are at war. In spite of this, the carols ring out. The shoppers are busy in the stores and on the street earlier than usual this year, for the boys must have their Christmas packages from home. And while perhaps a bit of the usual gaiety and cheer is lacking, there is a common bond of sympathy that seems to draw people together. And on those faces we meet are written courage and the determination that the right shall win. In their hearts there is the hope, and on their lips the prayer that in the not-too-distant future wars will cease again as of old, and they may hear the song of the angels, peace on earth, goodwill to men.
Oh. That's
Yeah.
good.
I
That was
think
written by
about
high
some of-
schoolers?
Yeah, and then
Huh.
she quoted that song. It's the poem by Wadsworth Longfellow,
Hmm.
the Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. That's a Christmas carol. I heard the bells on Christmas Day.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think there are so many places in the world where there is
Yeah.
war, and so it's a good thought. Peace on earth, goodwill to men
I like
and
that.
women.
And women. I like it. So before we wrap up here and send the people out, tell me a little bit more. This is a little off topic for Christmas, but you're in the seat here. Tell me a little bit more about the school board. How'd you get
Oh.
involved with it?
Okay. Well, as I told you, I have worked at Our Lady of Victory School. I was a school secretary, and I was a teacher and a teacher at the museum. And so I've always been interested in education, and I go to a lot of schools. So not just in Fergus Falls, but all over Otter Tail County. And I think it was in 2016, my son, who was in college, said, "Mom, you should run for school board." And so I said, "Oh." But do you know, the next year, one of the school board members had retired early. And
Okay.
so he left he was ill, and he left part of his term unfinished. And so
Okay.
they were going to appoint someone to fill the rest of his term on the school board. And so I thought maybe this is the time. And so I did apply for that. And the school board members did select me to
Awesome.
fulfill his term. And then when the next, that November, I ran in a special election and was elected. Yeah. And
Okay.
then ran again. So I'm on my second term now.
Second elected term.
Right.
So like 2 1/4 or 2 and a fraction.
Right. Right.
There
'Cause
you go.
a term is about 4 years. Is 4 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
So I'm excited about in January, we'll have a brand new makeup of the
Right.
school board.
Yep.
Mhm.
Change it up. It's always good
Mhm.
to change it up and get some different ideas and different personalities. I know I've had Jenny Christensen on the
Sure.
podcast. She's gonna be on that board. So
Right.
it's it's cool to see some of the stuff. I know that school board race got like super
Wow.
heated
It
this
did.
year. It got
Yes,
rowdy.
It did. Well, and then I'd like to say thanks to Matt Lemke and Natalie Knutson for the great job that both of them did in many years serving on the school board. They were
Absolutely.
real assets to our community, and really appreciate them.
Absolutely. I do a segment usually. It's sponsored by Liberty Business Systems. It's best business advice. And I didn't really prep you or give you the heads up that I was going to be asking you this, but does anything come to mind when I say best business advice?
Well, I have a friend, VJ Block, and when she was still working at one of the banks here in town, she would clip out, whenever somebody did something neat, she would clip it out of the paper and she would mail it to you and say, "Good for you. You did this special thing that was in the
Wow.
newspaper." And I think that was I was meaningful, that she was thinking about you. She was reading the paper and then seeing what you did. And so I don't know, do people still do things like that? Somebody could
That's good.
definitely.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good advice there, because I've heard a bunch of different, I've had over 100 episodes of the show, and I ask everybody best business advice. And I think that's one of the better answers I've got, because you want, obviously, be personal, be a part of your community. I get a lot of that, like, kind of generic type responses, but cut out maybe not a newspaper article, but find, someone said something about someone online, or, I know that, like, I was talking to Dave Jensen today before you came in, and he said, like, I was really surprised to hear all these different people say that they heard me on the podcast and really enjoyed hearing that. And it's uplifting to people to just say, "Hey, I saw you did this. I think that's a pretty cool thing."
Mhm.
So yeah, I like that. What else, Missy? Is there anything we didn't get to talk about? I sometimes will ask future outlook on stuff. Do you have, like, heading into the new year here, a little bit of an outlook for 2025 in the museum or the historical society?
Well, I'm always looking forward to our next exhibit. Right now, we have a crew from Newman Painting doing some
Yeah.
big painting.
Shout out Newman Painting.
They're doing a huge project. I don't know all of it, but it's been there's scaffolding, and the guys are there working every day, and it's gonna be awesome to see what they've done when it's completed. And I know we always are looking forward to the new exhibits of artists in the Dunlap room. Kathy, our curator of collections, has always lines up some of the best artwork artists. Right now, the family of Steve Janish is there to take down his exhibit. He was just such an amazing person in our community. Some of the things that we have in our community that we drive past or walk past every day and are due to his creativity and artistry, like the big goose on the lawn of the Van Dyke Park at the museum, or the otter and how he did the welding for that. And
Okay.
just somebody told me that the cross country team has a traveling trophy. He made that. I didn't know that. Yeah, just so many things that he did. And so we had that exhibit, and I always look forward to seeing the different types of art that will be at the museum.
I love that. I love that. So we got to brainstorm then what the next episode maybe with the Historical Society will be. I should get you and Chris on together to talk sometime.
Yes.
I've really enjoyed hearing from you guys. It's like I said, I need to spend more time at the museum, at the Historical Society, just because it's so fascinating. And I think it's humbling to look back in history. I think is some of the most humbling moments of your life when you realize how good we have it. I mean, we find the craziest things to complain about nowadays during the holidays. So
yes, we were talking about blizzards. The things that people survived. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Missy, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks
I
for
really
inviting
appreciate
me.
it. You'll definitely be back if you want to come back. You'll definitely be back on the podcast at some point again. I appreciate that. I appreciate the sponsors: Atlas Outdoor Services, Outstate Brewing, Stumbeano's, Victor Lundeen's, Fergus Home and Hardware, Liberty Business Systems, and Wayne Schuett with Century 21 Atwood. We couldn't do this show without you. So thank you guys very much, and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you.
I love it.